anybody want to,
Right there for a second. You're good.
anybody need a printed copy? Jen?
Here, I've got two.
Hey, Kim. Thank you.
Yeah. Hi. No, we're just, this is informal.
Great.
Thank you for all your research.
Oh,
Do you need hard copy?
Be great.
All right. Let's get rolling. Meeting of the Bylaws and Ordinances Committee, November 8th, 2024. And we're starting at 5:36 and we'll hopefully be done by 6:30. We will see. We're not gonna take any votes tonight. I mean, it's basically a discussion, and actually feel free to interrupt. Is there anybody from the public that?
Nope.
Okay. So this is a conversation, but I tried to give it some structure and sent an outline around, so we'll dive right in. You all know that
Hillary and Jen, turn your mics on.
you all know there's been a lot of discussion and concern raised about e-bikes, and every person that friend that I've stopped and asked a question, I said, do you have an opinion? Oh yeah, you know, I just learned that on one local street that at night there's like a pack of e-bikes that comes and roars up and down the street. I don't know if it's becoming more prevalent. Is it becoming more prevalent, do you think?
Not that I'm aware of, but
Not that.
I hear of
Nice
these
weather.
isolated reports, but we don't see them, or they're not getting called into us, so.
With the nighttime stuff or anything?
What you're talking of,
Yeah.
acts of kids roving the streets at night, we're not.
I've heard it from several neighbors
Yeah.
who have witnessed it. Yeah.
And are they being told to call the police when they see that, or?
We had that, I think I called you about that one conversation where, yeah, they did.
Well, I will tell my friend to do that. I was brainstorming about what we should do about it, but in the long term, but I
Yeah,
neglected
but
to
if it's
think
a
about the
nightly
short term.
occurrence, certainly, we can address it if it needs to be addressed.
Fabulous.
Yeah. I think he called once, but didn't call again because it didn't seem to do anything.
So just broadly, our state laws around e-bikes are in large part the same as 40 other states. There's a sort of an industry committee for e-bikes that the manufacturers, I think, are active on it, and I think they like the idea of uniform laws so they can manufacture something that will be regulated the same across the country. It's not in all states, but a lot of them, and it's you know, the categories are defined here. Actually, the class 3, I think, is the e-bikes are only can only be purchased or ridden by a 16-year-old or above, because that's a 28-mile-an-hour category. But the interesting thing about top speed is that, unlike cars, you know, the vehicle determines the speed. The motor will shut off if you try to go faster than 20 miles an hour. But I don't think our main focus is going to be, can people get around it? I think we're concerned enough that 20 miles an hour is pretty fast, especially on a sidewalk or someplace where people are.
Can I ask a question? Are
please.
we going to be looking at all these three, or is there one that you want to focus on, all these classes?
I think what we're going to talk about, what are rules that would be applicable to all e-bikes?
Okay.
And if we need to get more detailed than that, we can.
Okay.
But I think I know it bothers me when somebody has a bicycle and doesn't pedal. I'd like him to get some exercise, but for this purpose, that I think we're worth the fact that they can go 20 miles an hour.
I like it when kids have so
You're
much
the one that
homework, they
doesn't
can't
have-
be out at
Right,
night on a
yeah.
bicycle,
So
so
you
we
pedal
can
the
solve
fast.
that brain.
Yeah.
Hey, and Tom, this is also just not the sidewalks, because I've actually heard it's not just sidewalks, it's actually on the roads themselves, like literally.
Oh,
going down
definitely.
the middle of the road and not
yeah.
following, yeah.
Yeah, and that's a good segue that if you look on this next page, what Connecticut law says, that riders of e-bikes, actually the law talks about riders of bicycles, but e-bikes are bicycles.
Mhm.
So e-bikes are subject to all the duties applicable to the driver of any vehicle, subject to the requirements of the statute relating to motor vehicles. So, you look and you find out, there are a lot of applicable rules there that don't have the word e-bike on them, but I guess reckless driving is a concept that would apply to e-bikes, right? Because it's either.
By the same token, if a bicycle rider was just riding down
Yeah,
the
oh, yeah,
center of
same
I
thing.
mean, would that be a traffic violation?
Yeah, it would be improper operation of a bicycle. It wouldn't be reckless driving. It would be, there's an
Okay.
infraction
Okay,
for unsafe use of a bicycle.
which I think is a good distinction on, I don't know this is universally true, but it seems to be that in large part, the word infraction is the one that we apply to most of these violations.
Infraction's a mail-in ticket. You pay a fine.
Yeah.
Generally, it's now, I think, either $92 or $117.
Yeah.
Depending on which it is.
So there are lots of rules. I didn't bring copies, but if you want, there was a really, I think in one of the,
This thing?
no, that's helpful. That
Very helpful.
was put out by the state of Connecticut.
Yeah.
But actually, the police department in Simsbury, I think, was one of the ones you came up with. And they actually assembled a printed list of the words of every statutory provision, and it's like 25 pages long or whatever. Lawyers get into that stuff. But it's,
You may get into this later. I think the biggest challenge in all of this is that what we're talking about is e-bikes operated by unlicensed younger than 16 operators. And that's the group of operators who are unaware of traffic laws and unaware that they need to obey traffic laws, and whose parents are not insisting that they obey traffic laws. So, and as Chief has said before, and others, we can't give a 12-year-old a ticket for operating a motor vehicle recklessly. So the challenge is what teeth do we have to sink into trying to get this, the group of kids that ride around late at night, what ordinances can we put in place to address that issue?
yep,
I thought that we're also looking at not only under 16, but there's kids that are 16 that are driving in a way that's not safe.
Yeah.
As well. So it's
There's
both
still a
groups.
teenage brain operating from
Yeah.
16 to 18,
Well, and they can be given a
Yeah.
ticket, correct? They can be ticketed.
but just an infraction.
It gets,
still
that
minors.
16 to 18-year age gets difficult, and Nick could probably chime in on this probably better than I can, but they're not quite adults, but if they are licensed, they can be issued motor vehicle infractions. So if it's a motor vehicle infraction, they're subject and they're considered more or less an adult. But if they're over 18, then obviously they're an adult. But for criminal violations, they're still juveniles. So we could issue a 16-year-old infraction, just like if they were driving a car.
Okay. But I don't want to get too theoretical. I think one of the things the chief pointed out to me a few months ago was that, when you're 16, you're not focusing as much on e-bikes as you are on cars. And so the biggest problem is the under 16. And that, if we solve that, then I don't have any problem going beyond that if we want to be smart and thorough and whatever. But I think that the core of the nub of the issues is the younger ones, for the reasons you stated. And we have authority to write ordinances if we can figure out what they should be. And so let me turn it over to the chief, just concerned about what you're seeing and what you're hearing. I mean, how big is the issue?
And I guess that's the ultimate issue, is how big of a problem is this? Is this something that we need to act on or react to? In my 30+ years, these things are somewhat cyclical. Years ago, it was skateboards and regular scooters. Way back when, kids going downtown, leaving their backpacks in front of Mackenzie's. And so there's been several things that creep up over the years that we get sort of focused on. And right now it's these bikes, and I think specifically the e-bikes have been sort of a new phenomenon that the kids gravitate to, and all the kids want them, and they're fun to ride and they're easy to ride, and it's basically a motorcycle. So I think that's the appeal to the younger kids and the younger generation that's kind of sparked a new interest in riding the bicycles when you don't have to pedal. So we do hear the same concerns that are being spoke about. And we do occasionally get called to problem bicycle riders throughout mostly through the downtown area, riding in the streets, riding on the sidewalks, riding recklessly. And our typical enforcement action, and I've said this before, is we want, ideally in a perfect world, we want voluntary compliance. We want to be able to speak to the kids, tell them to stop doing it, and they listen to us and don't do it again. That's again in the ideal world. That didn't seem to be working very well. Seemed to see the same kids, or at least when they saw the police officers, they would kind of adhere to the rules. And then as soon as we're out of sight, they kind of go off and do their own thing again, which is no big surprise. So we've stepped it up from that to when we see the kids perhaps doing something a little bit more aggressive, a little bit more reckless, or perhaps a repeat offender, we'll stop the kid on the bike and have their parent come and pick them up and with the bike and give the parent a warning. We think that that's been helpful, and I don't know if it's partially the weather is slowing the bike riding down a little bit, or if it's actually they're starting to listen to us. It's hard to measure that. And I think the step after that would be, if it's possible, to start issuing the parents an infraction for this unsafe operation of a bicycle or an electric bike. The statute language is a little vague on that. It says no parent shall authorize or knowingly permit any such child to violate any of the provisions of the general statutes. Now, whether you can say a parent was knowingly allowing their child to ride down the middle of the road on the wrong way or on the sidewalk, that's up for debate, and they would probably argue that if they took it to court and contested the infraction. But that would be probably the progression of enforcement that we would be able to take.
So if you had, because you spoke of this in terms of steps. So if you had, Billy K, let's just say, and you've brought Billy K in the first way that you've been normally doing it, and you called the parents and they brought the child home in the bike, but it's sort of like a warning for said violation or infraction. And then Billy K, the next time you bring him in again, it's the exact same thing. Would that constitute a parent is knowingly, like they are aware of, there's a record of
There's an argument to be made in that way. Yes.
lawyers, like if that.
Well, I was going to mention to Nick that you don't need to have prepared the answer to this, but my observation is that there's a explicit statute saying that the parent could be liable for the parent's behavior in not supervising or whatever. But there seems to be a concept of a kind of a derivative liability where if you want to issue an infraction, the way the juvenile laws are written, you could actually only issue it for the kid's behavior, not for the parent's behavior, but issue that to the parents. But that's something we may want to look at as we move this process along. Do you have any thoughts about that so far?
Not exactly, Tom. I mean,
It's early.
Number one, the criminal world is a little bit different.
Yeah.
The one I typically operate in. That being said, I do have a pretty good relationship with our local state's attorney for purposes of enforcement of infractions and enforcement of violations of local ordinances. But no, I don't think I can speak intelligently as to our authority to, penalize the parents, or at least penalize these juveniles who don't have a driver's license and are operating these e-bikes inappropriately. You penalize them, send the ticket, I don't know, sort of care of the parent. I'm not sure how exactly that works, Tom.
Right. Well, we can look at that. One of the things I want to keep in mind, though, is that I'm very impressed with the impounding of the bike and making the parent sort of show up. That to me is maybe more meaningful than $100 ticket.
Yeah.
Make
it a nuisance for the parents so that they get annoyed with their child instead of
Right.
being like annoyed with us
And the
for.
And when we grew up, the kid would be mortified that the parent would have to go through that exercise. But I think some people might observe that things are different these days, and the parents sometimes might say, why are you bothering me? Why are you wasting your time? My kid's great.
Can I ask you this? When in the instances, Chief Frederick,
Yes.
when the in these instances where the parents have had to come down, where you've called, how do they act annoyed with you, or do they show some sort of perturbance with the kid?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not the one that's
Yeah,
doing this, so
obviously,
I
sorry.
have to take what the officers tell
Totally.
me, so it's mixed reviews, some parents aren't very supportive of us. And some parents are annoyed in the moment, but what's the message when they get home?
Mhm.
That's something I don't know. And will they take steps to ensure that it doesn't happen again? Again, I can't answer that. So it's really a brief encounter with us. And then what is the message that the child's getting from the parent once they get into the car, get home? I don't know that.
What would happen if you caught a 14-year-old driving a car, taking their parents' car without permission,
Well, and
and got stopped for speeding? I mean, if a bike is a vehicle,
Yeah.
like a car
Well,
is.
let me just correct that for a second, guys. There is no obligation. The distinction between a bike and a vehicle for purposes of where this might be going is you don't need a license to drive these e-bikes, obviously. So, I mean, the chief isn't going to be able to pull that 14-year-old over and say, hey, you're driving without a license. If, the kid's all over the place, chief, maybe you've got a couple other, violations that you could cite this juvenile for, but the licensure piece is not a requirement for these e-bikes.
Well, no, but you have to be 16 to have a class 3 e-bike. So if we had a 14-year-old riding a bike that can go 28 miles per hour over, which a car clearly can, just out of curiosity, what would happen in that instance if they got pulled over?
Again, that might be a referral
Yeah.
to with the parents. Generally speaking, what even if they took a motor vehicle or committed some other crime, that's what you're talking about, a juvenile summons and getting referred by our youth officer, getting in the juvenile court if it's a criminal violation of some nature. Something like this, driving an out of class e-bike, I don't know that would rise to the nature of a juvenile summons. I doubt it. It would probably be, again, just a referral with the parent and perhaps having the parent come pick the child up, but also then at a later date, have them come in and sit down with our youth officer and say, this can't happen again. We're going to document this. If this continues, or if the child continues, that might be something to rise to the level of negligence with the parent, because that's a little bit more than just riding a class 2 e-bike around town down the sidewalk. Now you're riding a bike that they're not permitted to ride, that they're not 16, they're not of age to ride.
Yeah.
So that kind of raises the sort of infraction level, if you will. So that might be something that we would refer the parents and have them sit down and speak with our juvenile officer. But the juvenile laws really push this back to the parents, no matter what the crime is. Even if it's a violent crime, there's not juvenile detention centers anymore, really, unless there's extremely serious, violent juvenile offenders. And Nick can speak to this as well, that there's so much of it is pushed back to the parents or the guardians to manage the child.
And just to be clear, I'm not suggesting criminalizing kids any, I don't want, and in fact, I'll say on the record here that I've seen a fair number of e-bike users on the street, and one of the kids actually did like a left-hand signal, and he was older. Now, he was over 16, so maybe that clearly over 16. So I have seen some kids acting appropriately on them.
So
which is
fine, I wanted to bring that up. You
Yeah,
know,
there's a
few
lot of
Fridays
kids,
ago,
yeah.
I was out riding downtown between 3 and 4, saw some kids, 2 kids come out of Dunkin' Donuts, hopped on their e-bike, went south on South Avenue, stopped at the red light.
Yeah.
Proceeded through the intersection, went into the library, and somebody still beeped the horn and yelled at them, you know, which was, you know, to me is, you know, I just, whatever we do, let's make sure that we don't punish the law-abiding kids that are going to the library or riding their bike to St. A's school or coming to downtown and doing things that they should be doing. So
Yeah, I
we
think-
just need to be careful of that.
That's the balance. And I guess the
Christina.
question is it a repeat?
Do you have this?
No, okay, thanks. It's sort of offender situation where you've got the same group of kids who are riding inappropriately. And if that's the case, then maybe there is an argument for the parents being held somewhat responsible or having a fine, like you hit people in their pocketbooks and all of a sudden it's a real problem.
Well, I think we'll rely on Nick's
Yeah.
firm's expertise to make us smarter on this.
Of course.
Yeah, I just wanted to say something about the idea of registering and what people thought about that, because I think establishing a relationship with the parents proactively, rather than, when something may happen that's not good, is a good way to kind of bring up the seriousness of the issue, have the parent and the child come together, register the bike, and then they know whoever does that, they know that they have a relationship with the police, positive, and that the kid is just taking it more seriously, the parents take it more seriously, and they know that there's like a fair amount of accountability. If we come up with an ordinance, they're gonna know it when they register. So I was just curious what other people's thoughts, and Chief, what your thoughts are on the registration, if that's too onerous for the police department, or what your thoughts are on that.
Honestly, I think that would be, that would be a lot to develop this system for what type of impact. I don't know that you would get, how much compliance one you would get, and how effective it would be as far as addressing what we're talking about today. You'd probably get the law-abiding people that ride their bikes lawfully that would register, and the ones that don't probably wouldn't care to register.
Could there be a penalty for not registering though?
That would be up
That's
to
what
the
I'm wondering.
ordinance.
So
I think
start
the
off
answer
with
to
the-
that is, yes, there could be. It's pretty,
Yeah.
the statute's pretty clear. We could do that. But I think that before, any rule we write, we ought to feel like we're going to get a certain batting average of impact on compliance.
Mhm.
And it's possible that we could write rules that are expensive to administer and get almost no leverage on compliance.
At first I was worried about I liked the idea of registration, and then I was worried about like what the cost benefit. But then I thought you had an interesting link to that govpilot.com.
Yeah.
I mean, I
Yeah,
don't know what the
that
cost
was
of that
interesting.
software was, but that seemed to streamline. Like it would take the work off of more admin for another department.
Well,
Good.
You have
Rita's got a
Rita
hand up,
and
and
Maria.
then Maria.
Hi, Rita.
Hi. Yeah, I'm sorry. I think
Thanks,
this is,
Eric.
didn't mean to interrupt this great conversation, but I just wanted to ask the question because it was started to be asked, but I didn't really hear the answer. What happens now when someone calls and says, hey, there's this, kids are in the street causing a ruckus? What is the response from the police department? And by the way, I've heard that people are hesitant to call the police on because they feel like they didn't necessarily want to call the police on these kids or whatever, but they don't know what they should be doing. But when they have called, like what does the police, what do your officers do? Like, what's the protocol when they say show up and see kids on these e-bikes? What is the protocol?
Well, if we do actually find the kids, if we do encounter them,
Mhm.
what we first started doing, and as I said before, we try to establish a rapport with the kids and try to get voluntary compliance, give the kids a warning, and get them to adhere to the rules of the road and drive their bike responsibly. If that doesn't work, we would seize the bike and have the parent come and pick up the child, either at police headquarters or at the scene, and if it could be done quickly enough, and then take the child home.
But that's assuming, okay, because that's assuming something, right? Because you have maybe one officer see a bunch of kids And then maybe those same kids could do it again, but maybe another office. Like, how do you really know if it's the same people doing it? Like you said, if it's recurring, like, how do you know?
Well, we don't have a database of
Right.
kids
Yeah.
riding their bikes, so typically it's the same time and you just develop a working knowledge of the town. But there's no foolproof system of a database of 13-year-olds riding their bikes
Like you're not
irresponsibly.
taking their names down or finding out who their parents are. You
It
really
depends on the
wouldn't know.
situation. Yeah, I mean, it depends on the situation and if it's serious enough, we would document it through a written report or in our CAD system. But to your point, there's no working database or list of kids. And that would
And
be
you're not-
something that,
Sorry, go ahead.
and that's something that I think I would probably task one of my SROs with next spring. I don't think there's much point in doing it now, but if this becomes an issue again next spring when the weather gets better, have our middle school or high school SROs come to the downtown. They know the kids by name, and sort of develop that roster that you're speaking of kids that we're dealing with and have a knowledge of them. And because it's probably the same 10 or 15 or 20 kids that are doing this, that are riding through the downtown area.
And are you documenting every call? Like, can you say today we got X amount of calls regarding e-bikes? Do you document that? Do you track that?
We track it through our call. You know, if we get a call for service, we would track that. Yeah.
So you'd write down like, oh, I got a call for an e-bike complaint.
Yeah. If we sent an officer, it would be a traffic complaint of some nature. We would log it in our system. Sure.
Yeah, my understanding is that some of the the kids that are misusing the bikes aren't from New Canaan though. So the SRO thing,
I've not heard that. I don't know. Kids are coming
That's like
from
a-
out of town.
that's what I've been hearing
I'd be very
because they can
surprised.
get here pretty easily on the bikes.
Yeah, maybe. I
And,
don't know.
and that's a lot of the stuff that I've been hearing. So I don't really feel that comfortable developing a list of kids, but that's just me, but.
Well, I was actually more
it's
curious
not
also
just
about the,
independent kids that are doing it.
but I'm also just curious about the tracking of how many. I mean, I'm sorry. Just like how many, like knowing how many calls you're getting for that specific reason would be interesting too.
It's not a lot. I searched our database for the last
Mm-hmm.
6 months, and there was maybe 10 or so calls that we've responded to that were actually entered. Now, that doesn't take into account if an officer's just on patrol and encounters some kids, tells them, hey, knock it off, don't do that sort of thing, which probably happens more than getting an official call from somebody and a call for service.
Hold on, Jen, Maria's next. Sorry.
Maria, you want to call her Maria?
Sorry, go ahead, Maria.
Yeah, I just had a couple of thoughts. I mean, just at a high level, I'm wondering, will the use, and, to Rita's point, like, what's the data on all of this? The number of events, number of issues, and do we think the use of e-bikes will grow? And is it more a recreational thing, or is this the way of the future of getting around a town? So, I mean, I'm with Kim on the idea of looking at maybe registration, because that way you kind of capture we register pets for, safety reasons and tracking things. So I kind of feel like this is a safety issue, and it wouldn't have to be punitive, but maybe there's a way to just know who owns and who's using the bikes. I mean, it's, I guess where it's a problem, it is a big problem, but it sounds like it's not as many kids as I'm thinking. It sounds like it's a smaller group of kids, but they repeatedly do stuff. We're driving unsafe.
I'm not clear exactly what you would do with that information. How does
With the
knowing?
registration?
Yeah,
Well, the registration would be if you see a bike riding around and someone's being unsafe, at least you can track down, theoretically, you can read a tag or something. You can
oh,
then,
now you've got a tag.
Well, you would stop the person and you could know
But I
if it's
mean-
registered to that person.
Yeah, it's like with your dog.
And if
I have
it's not,
contact,
Yeah, I did.
And if the dog bites someone, then
And-
they know if they're vaccinated, they know.
Do they give
how
a
to
dog a
find
ticket
people.
then?
But we just have to acknowledge that there's an
Oh, I do.
admin
Give you a ticket.
No,
cost to all
no, I
that,
was just
right?
joking.
That there's, right? Like,
Yeah, and how do you
it's-
enforce registering? Like, how do you make?
I'm just trying to balance it out, like.
I
Similar
guess
to the-
theoretically, if it's not registered, the person would be fined. And I mean, again, then you hit people economically.
Yeah, because it's like, how do you enforce people to actually register?
It's also a good way to get kids not to loan their bikes out to kids that don't know how to use the bike and things like that. So if you
I
stop
don't think that would be
someone,
very effective.
what?
They're not gonna think that through. They
You don't
won't
think that would be effective?
No,
They'd let
I
other
don't.
kids borrow it? That's a bigger safety risk, a kid riding a bike for the first time and not knowing how to ride it.
I just have a specific question on, in terms of the issues you've had, do any of them involve, has an adult or an elderly person been injured as a result of reckless bike riding?
Not that I'm aware of, other than, the first day of school, I think a kid on
Yeah.
a bike
That's right.
was in the road and clipped a car and got a little injured falling off the bike, so.
That would be like the most serious event?
Yeah, and fortunately, there hasn't been anything very serious as far as injuries in that regard, or worse, pedestrians getting hit by a person riding on the sidewalk, not that I'm aware of. So there's probably been some minor accidents as there are with any bikes, or any kind of things like that, but nothing too serious that I'm aware of at this point.
Let's take the worst case scenario. What if some 14-year-old kid on an e-bike is found liable for causing serious injury to a pedestrian? What then what's the pursuit at that point? What are the legal steps?
That's probably Nick's realm more than mine, because now you're talking civil liability more than criminal.
Okay.
If I may, it's not, wouldn't it be covered under the parents' automobile insurance, house insurance?
Again, that's not my wheelhouse.
I don't think it would be criminal. It would be.
It's civil liability. So
Okay.
Whoever, again, that's not.
So an underage, a 14-year-old kid on an e-bike doing something that if he or she were 18 would be a criminal act is not treated as a criminal act.
Well, no, it is, and there would be sort of a criminal referral, perhaps a criminal mischief or something like
Yeah,
that.
that's,
Let's take the bikes out of it. Let's say a kid was
yeah,
doing something reckless,
right.
and that would be, the crime would probably be a criminal mischief or something of that nature. Again, that would be, a juvenile summons where they would be, the parent would be issued the summons with the child, and then they'd have to go to juvenile court, and most likely that the punishment wouldn't be too severe. It'd probably be something that the parent would be, or the child would have to do some community service or something of that nature, or.
What I'm trying to understand is whether or not there's an e-bike involved is really, if something bad happens, what are the steps to be taken? I think and that's what you've just outlined.
Sure, yeah.
Okay.
I do think all eyes would be honest, if we don't have any ordinances and a 14-year-old recklessly, somehow up and down on the sidewalks and an elderly person
But
has a
there's-
severe.
there's
But that's
statute,
already
state
against the
statute.
law.
Right.
I
Yeah.
mean, so we don't
Yeah.
need to, we don't
You don't
we
need to
don't have
echo
to,
state
yeah,
statute.
add to that
So
for it to be enforceable.
the chatter that I hear, and again, I just think I'm not a big believer in just anecdotal, but is that, oh, they're always on the sidewalks. Is that not the case?
Not what I've heard.
No,
Wait,
I've seen them much more often on the roads.
Yeah,
Yeah.
in the middle of the street, Elm Street.
So
going up
they
and
are
down,
allowed
the
on the
wheelies.
sidewalks, just not
Oh,
on the
they're
roads.
not allowed.
Yeah, okay.
In the downtown, well, the motorized are not allowed anywhere, you're right?
Well, I think that could be clarified.
Yeah.
I don't think state law is as obvious as that article suggests, but that's easy. That's,
But yeah, no bike is allowed on the sidewalks in the downtown business and retail district.
That's clear.
So
That's our ordinance.
two-wheel pedal bike
Right.
is not allowed. So obviously, like.
And I have been,
allowed.
I've heard this anecdotally, yeah, there was so, but again, I don't, unless I see it with my own eyes, I don't.
Rita's-
that's true.
Rita's got it.
Rita?
Yeah, so I mean, I've heard from several people, and I've also, I mean, New Canaan moms, you can, people are reporting sort of incidents, but the person that I know personally that that has seen this happened 2 different times, he literally had to swerve out of the way and almost hit another car. And there've been like 2 incidents of that just with one person alone, seeing the kids on they're in the middle of the road. They're not on sidewalks. Apparently, if you wanted to talk to some folks at the firehouse, it's been a big topic of discussion because they've noticed and they've witnessed it a number of times. So you may want to just reach out to them because they have some also anecdotal, but like first person witnessing that, cars almost crashing. And the fact that there hasn't been a major accident, like thank God, but I wouldn't, it'd be awful if our luck ran out,
Do we all?
The hard thing is that like that can happen with a car, right? Or a regular bike. And if the police don't see it and nobody reports it, we can't report something from New Canaan moms, like
Well, he reported it. The person that I'm talking about actually reported it, but yeah.
one time. But it's one of those things. And I suspect the kids kind of know this. And I don't know what the answer to that is that if it's not witnessed or filmed or something, how do you deal with that? How would an ordinance even begin to deal with that? Because there's plenty of adults. I live on a sort of throughway and there are adults speeding down my road constantly. So it's not like everybody's, everybody else is an angel and it's this 15 to 20, like there is a problem with aggressive driving in this town.
Yep.
So, and my question is to your point with your neighbor or your friend who've seen it, like what kind of ordinance for our purposes could we draft that would address this and prevent it beyond what state law would already provide if you witness it or somebody films it or there's some evidence?
Well, what I tried to do in the last 5 or 6 pages is to talk about the things that we could do that are not already handled in state law.
Yeah.
And wasn't one of them no bikes at night?
Mhm.
I'm not suggesting that I am totally agreeing in that, but that was one of the suggestions. So that would take care of this problem.
Well, at night.
At night.
If it was complied with.
Yeah.
But
then.
What's that?
But that might be potential if someone has a job that they have to go to and they use their e-bike, that's
we're
something with the,
Yeah.
The main focus of this is under 16. So I think you're less likely to have a work problem if you're.
that's true. If it's under
16 than if
16.
you're older.
May I ask one question of clarification that I just wasn't sure the answer? Is it correct that, because I thought in reading you sent the Connecticut, that the state law says that they cannot be on bike paths or trails. Is that correct?
I can't be specific about that tonight.
Sorry.
It's clear though. I can tell you that the answer to that question is clear. I just don't have it.
I don't know that it's every trail.
Yeah,
Right.
but they said that.
It's very specific about the
Yeah,
type of
yeah,
trail.
yeah.
It said the municipality can determine, I thought, what trail they want or don't want them to be on. So we could just say, and I'm not the attorney, but we could just say
Right.
Irwin, no Waveney,
I believe we already have,
but maybe
I believe the
Bristol.
town's ordinance already says there's no bikes on any town trail.
No.
That's what-
Oh.
See, I thought that.
Well, certainly not in parks, but that's an easily knowable question. Could we just defer that
Yes.
till the next meeting?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We, just so you guys know, the Parks Department just put together a set of ordinance or governing principles and and they do not allow e-bikes on trails in the park. And that's from Parks and Rec.
Does that include Bristow?
Any park, it is for all parks. They created a new document this year and it's for all parks.
Okay, thanks.
My sense is we won't need to bolster that structure. It's probably in place already.
Mhm.
So let's just zip through these and maybe the rest of the discussion can expand from that. the first type of thing that we could do is limit the footprint of places they could ride. And we certainly would want to clarify what the rules are for trails. I'd like to clarify sidewalks because I don't think the state statute is as clear as we'd like, but is it everybody's sense that an e-bike does not belong on a sidewalk? Is that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, so then you get into the question of, at least many of the stories that we've heard are downtown because it's so visible. And we could do anything we want to in that sense. We could say that e-bikes don't belong anywhere in the business and retail zones, which is a fairly wide footprint, or we could do something less than that. One of the things that occurred to me is we could have e-bike parking locations, and that could sort of establish a perimeter within which you couldn't ride, because the idea is it would be like a driver would. You want to go shopping and you need to find a parking lot, and then you get out of your car and you walk. That's something that we don't have to go into great detail tonight, but you think about what, and maybe observe where, if there were to be a footprint, where would you think it logically would be?
Yeah, my only concern, it sounds like a good idea. My only concern is where would they go? And what would be the unintended consequence of
I
a bunch
agree,
of
yeah.
like 15 kids? Would they then go to the parking lot across from Roger Sherman, or, which is even more dangerous, what they get if they're on O&O? So I don't think it's going to stop them from riding, but.
Right, like
it's just a thought.
I was thinking the same thing, the unintended consequences might be that everything slows down around town, and if they were not there, are they gonna be out on the big windy road?
Right,
And
that's my only thought.
that more dangerous for them.
I would agree, and I would add that if you were to say, okay, we'll restrict it around the library, it would bring on problems that the merchants or the institutions would feel, why are you putting them within our circle of traffic? So I think you have to be careful.
I think that's
not
the
to
opposite of what
alienate.
I was suggesting. I was suggesting that there's a core area where there's a particular density of pedestrians and cars, and that it's very awkward to navigate any bicycle, much less an e-bike, in a very heavily trafficked, area. And so I would say there should be a perimeter. I mean, it could be as little as saying no e-bikes on Elm Street.
Mhm.
Yeah,
I don't
okay.
think there would be huge unintended consequences of that.
Right.
I mean, if a kid wanted to shop on Elm Street, he'd park his car at the train station or in lumberyard lot and walk to Elm Street. That's the concept.
I like that, because I think it's like an elegant solution in the sense, I thought when I first read a blackout all around town made me worry about what Kim was saying, but like
Yeah.
what you were saying, that seems very logical. Like Elm
Mhm.
Street has so much going on, and there's a lot of room for, if you add bikes to the mix, e-bikes, so certain blackouts, I could get on.
Yeah,
board
a
with
very
that.
restricted, narrow, area where
Then,
it's a high-risk area.
then the question becomes, what about bicycles? And,
Well-
people who own e-bikes are saying, well, you're prejudiced against e-bikes, but you're gonna let somebody ride a bicycle right down Elm Street.
I've never seen that.
It's on we could apply the same rules to bicycles if we chose to.
I mean, I've seen plenty,
But
I've
the
seen
rationale,
bicycles riding the wrong way down Elm Street.
so we could do that.
Yeah.
But the rationale for the distinction is that the e-bike, because of the greater speed is a more dangerous,
Mhm.
poses more dangerous problems.
Mhm.
And also bikes have been doing it for 100 years, and e-bikes are a fairly new phenomena. So
Just from my experience, though, I see far more adult riding bikes, going through red lights, going through stop signs, going much faster than 25 miles an hour at much greater consequences when they hit a car, hit a pothole. So I've seen far more regular bikes with more severe injuries. So just add that to the equations. You can come down Elm Street from Weed Street on a 21 speed bike pedaling much faster than 28 miles an hour or 20 miles an hour and much more recklessly. And I've stopped numerous adults on bicycles saying, I get it. You're seated in, you're clipped in, you don't want to slow down, you don't want to lose your momentum, but you can't go through the red light at Cherry Street and South Avenue.
Mhm.
well, I agree that's a problem, but my suggestion here is that we grapple with a narrower problem, which is kids safety. I really would be hesitant to structure an ordinance process where we tried to save adults from everything that they might do.
Is it-
And I don't want to say that
Chief,
because
you give a ticket
because there's
for-
a problem with adults, we therefore shouldn't try to protect kids. Where's the logic there?
I just have a question. Can you give a ticket if a bicycle doesn't stop at a red
Yeah,
light?
it's just.
Yeah, so
they're not
there's a
fun.
procedure in place for it to, yeah.
So if I may, I like the idea of just restricting it to Elm Street, but I would also add Forest because it's also a densely populated sidewalk area with traffic, very narrow, and it's dangerous.
Well, I totally agree. I think we should all think about that, what that footprint could be. And
Well, that's your first point. No e-bikes in business and retail zones. We're just trying to define what that business and retail zone is.
no,
Because then you extend out to Maine and then now we're beginning to get back to they're just nowhere in town.
I think business and retail zone is defined in the zoning regulations. So it would be,
It's a-
correct me if I don't want to speak for you, but
Right.
you're saying we could think of it that way, or we could make it narrower in our ordinance.
Not to be the devil's advocate, but I'm just going to say, we just did the POCD in transit oriented development. So this goes against,
well,
kind of goes against, transit oriented development, which I'm not saying I'm not in favor of doing what you're saying, but transit oriented talks about all kinds
Well,
of
that's one of
e-bikes and
the-
transportation and.
that's one of the reasons why I want to keep this narrow.
Mhm.
Because we have a public policy, it's not universal, not a consensus, but there are a lot of people that believe that for environmental reasons and health reasons, that we should encourage greater bicycle use. And I don't want to really get in the way with that, which is one of the reasons I don't want to tackle anybody over 16.
Mhm.
But I just think that in the balance, I would think child safety is
Yeah,
concern.
yeah, I agree.
But if I may add, Tom, one of the things, I don't think that we would be able to create an ordinance to affect a state road like 124 or Main Street, but we could do it for Elm and we could do it for Forest much more easily.
Rita's got her hand up.
We'll look at that.
I thought that municipalities don't, rise above the state law if it's our ordinance.
We even have a hard time when we do a stripe walk crossing.
Oh.
Crosswalk.
Yeah, I knew that. I just didn't know if
But
if
would
we
that be the
could
same?
supersede an ordinance.
Like, I know we can't, like, something with stop signs, like
Yeah.
at 123, they never can put one up by Michigan or whatnot, but would that be the same of like regulating e-bikes? So we're allowed to come up with our own ordinance.
Let's identify that as a legal issue. We'll
Yeah,
try to
let's-
get that resolved.
I mean, that would be
Oh.
like requiring the state police to like manage traffic on those instead of our local police giving tickets. It seems to me like we can do that. We can enforce safety regulations on our own streets as long as it isn't inconsistent with state law.
So we'll take a look at that.
Rita's still got her hand up.
Rita,
So there's an area, and I'm trying to remember where, in Southern California, what wheels you have, whether it's a bike or a scooter or a skateboard, you've got to like walk it. Like they're just areas where it's densely populated. So whatever wheels you're on, if you're on a bike, you got to get off and walk it. If you're on an e-bike, you have to get off and walk it. Like it's just, there are signs, like this area is, if you're on any, and it's very like, it's broad, but it's very equal. It's very there's equanimity, I guess, whatever, where it doesn't matter what type of wheel you're on, you have to get off of it. So I don't know if that could be enacted, like whether it's downtown on Elm Street or Forest, but that could be something it's pretty consistent.
I don't have a problem with, I would think the rule would be no riding in a
Yeah.
certain area.
Right.
And the walking would be fine, I would imagine. Well,
Right,
okay.
and so you can still have your bike, but you're walking it. Like that's a
Baby
very,
carriages, I'm not getting in the way of that.
Devane,
But
like you're-
Yeah, you're walking it.
New Canaan, Connecticut.
but it's known that certain areas are just like that and they're signs, right? So like it becomes sort of what people do. I'm sure that there's some type of enforcement, but like it becomes the norm, right? Especially if like there's certain areas and it's just consistent, whether you're on whatever, you gotta, you know, you can have your bike, but you just have to be off of it. Anyway, it's just a thought.
Yeah, I did see some places that, you know, Tom, you said something about getting the NCPS involved, but around schools, they also put restrictions, not just around business zone. So I don't know if that's a problem. haven't talked to them about that.
I think, yeah, we should probably talk to them. I think that kids take their e-bikes to school, right? I mean, sometimes that's how they get to school. So. But they probably aren't allowed to do wheelies in the parking lot.
Well,
Yeah, but they might need to
whether they're
walk, they might
allowed
need to
to.
walk them.
or not, I mean, all of this is, there's laws in effect, and the police have stopped the sort of known offenders before and called their parents. And to me, I think all of these thoughts are really intriguing, and we should check all the legality, but it seems like this sort of voluntary compliance right now in any way, shape, or form isn't really working for us with respect to this core group of kids. We can pass a million rules, we can pass laws, and they're just being disregarded. So how do we address that is my question, because I think to some extent, like, I think these are all great ideas. I mean, if I could, I would probably turn Elm completely walkable with no cars and maybe forest, but it's not feasible. But I'm sitting here thinking like, but there's this group of kids that we're trying to address that aren't following pretty well-known rules, that like, you can't go this way down Elm Street.
Yeah, I want to
Right?
be.
And I think that's part of the appeal. I think that's what
But it comes back to what you might have originally said, which is like impounding. I don't know how much these bikes cost, you know, but like making it sting for these, 14 families, so that the parents just get so fed up with their kid that they take the bike away.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important that there's new kids that are getting these bikes.
Yeah.
And we don't have any consequences. So I think it's a training thing, like, oh, do you know this is new ordinance, whatever. But I think we also have to be careful. It's not just 14 kids from New Canaan. It is kids. And Chief, I'm not in charge of your database or whatever, but I mean, from what I've been hearing, it's kids from other towns that are riding here and joining up with kids from New Canaan. So it's not just New Canaan.
So some of the things that I would consider
Yeah.
are not just for the, incurables, but they're for kids that don't even, just don't know better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And would be inclined to follow rules
Mhm.
and their parents. But I also think that we need to consider education processes and, constantly be looking is how do we penetrate? I mean, we've made great strides on tobacco smoking, and that looked for years like it was impossible to put a dent in. We were making a dent in it. So
Can I ask you, just because we sit on that committee with New Canaan Cares, is that a organization that could do just like some messaging on the rules?
Yeah, well, so
Maria with her hand up and Rita.
what I would suggest is, if we could somehow partner with the driving school, because these statutes say that the kids have to follow the same rules of the road as a
Yeah.
motor vehicle, but they're 13, 14, 15, so they haven't gone through driving schools yet. So they don't know what the rules of the
Right.
road are. So perhaps we could partner with like the driving schools. They can have a modified class of saying, if you're gonna ride a bike and it's, from the 12, 13, 14-year-old, this is what you're expected to do. You have to wait at a red light. You can
Right.
right turn on red, those sorts of things. Give them an education course and,
Well, if we-
if we could develop some sort of curriculum that they could follow, perhaps we could get it in the schools, just a couple hours just informational.
if we could figure out the data management side of this, it obviously makes sense to have an education requirement, a certification requirement like we do with cars. You learn this stuff and that's how you get your license.
It's the whole registration, licensing, certification, education, the administrative burden is the challenge there, but you do
Right.
have-
We should talk about shortcut ways to,
Yeah,
Not
that's
do
a
it-
long,
not-
that's a
not do it like
long-term
we
way
do
to
cars.
address the issue, because e-bikes, that's gonna only grow, but Maria's had.
Maria.
Well, to add to what you're saying, I mean, I think a quick way is just every student has to take health class or advisory. I mean, we could instantly have a curriculum partnership with the schools on the safety aspect. And I kind of feel like it's a tiered approach, like you have to start with the safety. I still think a registration component along with a safety course would be helpful, but I know we don't want to build a whole, department to do this, but I really think the schools, they have the audience. They can instantly communicate with every family in town, and they can address the students in the classroom. I mean, it's sort of like an ongoing process.
And they have the SROs to support that process, so.
But not every kid rides an e-bike, so I don't think it makes sense
It wouldn't
to
just be e-bikes,
educate
it's
everyone.
all- Yeah.
Not
I
just the
would, I
e-bike.
don't think it would be I don't think you would have to drag it out. I think it could be part of the curriculum and everyone, I think the use of e-bikes will probably grow rather than shrink. So,
But 90% of the rules are the same as for bicycles
And
so,
And
and scooters.
Can I add to that? Because that's what I agree. This is what I actually suggested at our last meeting, which is education and awareness is probably the
Right.
biggest thing that we could actually do. And I also think that, like, to your point, it could, some of these kids I don't think are trying to be jerks. I think some of them just don't know any better, to your point, Tom. I really do. I think that could be a significant part of that, just them just not knowing. So I agree with folks that think that education might be the way to go and awareness. I would be very supportive of that direction.
Well, my point of view is anything we can get the schools to do, we should.
Yeah, I'm in favor of
Pretty simple.
education, but not in the schools. Because I think that it's just, I don't really see that as the
So what-
place for it. I don't know
Do
what
they
the
do
place is.
driver's ed
but-
in school?
No, they don't.
That's all separate.
Yeah, it's all
That's why you
separate.
said the driving school.
I mean,
They used to.
if we had a registration process, people could go to Lewis Driving and take a 2-hour class, but then the parents would have to pay for that. I see it as more like an elective thing because some kids don't ride bikes and there's so much stuff that the schools are doing. I think that it's not the right place for it, but I do support education.
So Tom, and so part of along those lines, and I just sort of sidebarred to you, but New Canaan Cares, I mean, I know they have their funding, they have a certain mandate, so it could be vaping, it could be this or that, but they often go a little wider than that. They've talked about gambling and they do a really good job with messaging in the community. They have their little pizza box stickers and things like that. So I don't know, maybe if we want to approach them in a partnership.
Intriguing.
You're
I think it's a
suggesting,
great first step, right? Like, why not try to
Isn't this
educate and
wonderful
build
nonprofit
awareness?
organization that we have in town who already partners with
Yeah.
the police and some of the other like behavioral health? They message on other kinds of health issues. So if we,
Yeah.
I don't want to speak for them that it might be out of their lane, but it might be part of their.
Well, it's also Health and Human Services gives them a grant. So you've got another entity in town that might be a possible place to create a collaboration of where the education comes from.
Mhm.
That's a possibility.
Yeah, that's a good.
I'm hearing registration, education, administrative, long-term kind of stuff, which is kind of getting away from bylaws and ordinances. What do we want to think about or talk about in terms of enacting or writing any new ordinances?
Well, registration would be an ordinance.
Registration would be an ordinance.
Yeah.
If the whole education process that's getting a
But-
little,
That could be
Right,
part
you're
of
right,
our
you're right.
mission.
You're right. Yeah, we wouldn't have a jurisdiction over
right.
education.
So to respond to your question, I don't know what the answer is. I feel that there's an interest from a lot of constituents in town, and it seems to be based on what you sent us, but also anecdotally, other towns are that many in the community, even if it's not really a huge issue, would like to see us seem to be acting on it. We do get a lot of emails on it.
Well, another way to put that is if the kid gets seriously hurt and we haven't done
Right.
anything about it,
or worse.
right?
Yeah.
And we sat on our hands and didn't do anything about it.
That's how I feel.
Yeah.
But that's my major.
Well, it's not
concern.
just the kids too, it's that we're endangering others.
What your
My
concern?
major concern is when I see these kids doing these things that they either know or don't know is silly. I said, that's an accident waiting to happen.
Mhm.
And shame on us if we haven't done something to address it before it happens.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure it's effective.
Yeah.
I don't want it to
Right.
be just
Performative.
doing performative,
Yeah.
so I'm not a
Right.
huge fan of
No, I
like
understand.
adding ordinances to make us feel better and less guilty if
But,
something
but I
happens.
didn't
like-
phrase what I was saying right too, because I understand and I
That-
agree with
that
you,
makes
but,
sense.
but on the other hand, we are getting a lot of emails randomly on this, so the town is asking us to have eyes on it,
Yes.
you know, and
So do we need to hear from the public more? I mean, we had one person come to town council and speak on it. I mean, was this, the public
question,
was invited, right? That's one of your questions.
Yeah. Do we do that now, or do we try to come up with something a little more specific for the public to react?
Yeah, I think that
The
would be
latter?
better. I think
Yeah,
that would be
that's-
better, yeah.
Yeah, because I don't
Can-
think
can-
anybody from the audience would have a solution.
Mhm.
Right,
But they would have an opinion on our possible solutions.
Right.
So I think that makes sense.
okay.
Can I make one suggestion though? Like if a police officer sees someone doing something that's dangerous and that's against whatever law, at that moment with that specific incident, can't that bike or scooter be taken away?
No.
No.
Well,
No,
not permanent, not permanent, not
But you can
permanent.
Not permanently. I mean, taken away and that the parents, I mean, just like if it's witness, if a
We
police
can't
I'm not
officer
sure-
sees it.
I'm not sure it can even be impounded in the way that you're describing.
Well,
It can't be taken as punishment.
No,
I mean,
Unless
you give it
that's-
back to the
unless-
parents, but you,
That's
for,
what
in
they're
that
doing.
moment,
They call the parent to come and pick up the kid
Yeah.
and the bike.
right?
That's being done when they see it happen. I don't want
Is
to
it?
short shrift our police here.
Well, I don't know.
our-
I'm asking, is that being done today? Because
Yeah,
I was
we-
told
yeah.
that, I was told that
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 not
can't
important
happen.
there.
That does happen.
The police can't take the bike. They just send it home with the parents, right? Yeah,
Like,
they
you
can't
seize
seize it.
people's
They
property.
can't
So
seize,
you-
that's called stealing.
No,
I
but we can
understand,
have
I
an
understand.
ordinance
I guess
about
let
it,
me be
but we don't
clear.
have-
So when that happens, you call, like you say, okay, kid, you can't go anywhere if you like,
Constitutional.
Impounding?
That's up to the parents then, to then tell the kid they can't go anywhere.
I'm just trying to understand what happens today though. Like when you say you catch the person not doing the right thing and it's dangerous, do you stop the child and say, okay, I'm gonna have to call your parents, give me your number, and then they'll pick you and the e-bike up? Is that what happens?
Yes, not in every case, but yes, that does happen.
so the parents come, what if the parents aren't home? What do you do then?
Babysit.
Yeah, we have to
Nothing.
use
You
our
don't let them go.
But I thought, I'm sorry, I thought you take the kid and the bicycle to the police station.
It depends on the situation. If they're really reckless and we really feel it's important that the parents are notified, we will do it. But if the parents are 4 hours away, we can't arrest the child and throw them in
Right.
lockup until the parents show up. I mean, there has to be a measured, reasonable response to this.
But you don't feel uncomfortable if there's an egregious situation and you take the bike and the kid to the police station and call
No.
the parents?
Yeah,
All right, so.
if that were appropriate.
So,
Yeah.
so Nick, it seems to be there's must be a matter of degree here between this temporary, this temporal solution and actually seizing property. I think there's a concept of, you absolutely can seize property that's used in the commission of a crime, right? So,
Well, some
don't say you
ordinances-
can never seize property.
Right.
If it's evident, I mean.
Yeah, I think we're
That's.
Yeah.
We're
No,
covering
but-
a lot of ground there with that statement. That's not what we're talking about. And in this situation, if a kid's riding a bike improperly, we can't take it from him as punishment. I think that's what was
Right.
somewhat being suggested, that we take it.
No,
for-
I wasn't suggesting that. I was just saying, can you take it like then the parents have to come pick it up?
Yes,
That being the purpose.
And
Yeah.
that is a scary thing for a
Right.
child to
Well,
have your
most
parents
kids.
call.
Not
You
anymore.
would think.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well,
Depends on the child and the parent.
He just said not anymore.
no,
No.
not anymore? Oh, my
When the
God.
parents yell, the police.
There are some ordinances that you can impound the bike. That I did see some ordinances that based on behavior, the police could impound, that was in the ordinance. I'm not suggesting.
You saw ordinances where?
In other states,
In
I
other
think.
states, California.
Yeah, well, those states have different state laws that specifically authorize their municipalities to impound for those purposes. Right now, our
So-
state law only authorizes municipalities to impound motorized things like ATVs, dirt bikes. Remember, Chief, that was the whole thing, 10 years ago? So we don't have that express specific authority in what we're talking about here.
Okay, thank you for
So
clarifying.
you're saying that the police should stop doing what they're doing now?
That's not what I'm saying, Tom. I'm
Keeping it
saying,
that.
like you said,
Like I need
there's
an
a,
attorney next.
Well, you sort of have on it.
All right.
Let's get back to what we're trying to do here.
Can I suggest, as a statement resulting from this meeting, we say in the strongest possible language, we want to ensure that residents of the town and their children abide by the laws and ordinances that are already on the book, which include boom, 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 and let's list those. No bicycles or two-wheeled vehicles of any kind on sidewalks, and whatever those are. So we've made a public statement saying, in case you didn't know what the laws are, here are the laws, and we are strongly encouraging everybody to abide by them. And then say, we are also considering additional or new ordinances that may further restrict the use of e-bikes within certain areas in town.
Well, any one of us can get an article in the Sentinel or whatever in our personal capacities. I don't think it's an official act of of our body to create a communication,
We're
a
not
press
ready-
release.
we're not ready- We're not ready to lay down some specific new ordinance recommendations yet either.
Well, I think we are. What we've done in the
Discuss
past is Hillary and Tom have gone together and come up with some samples, right? And that's what we've done. I think we're kind of at that point. Like, I think it seems like we all agree that we need more than what we currently have. Let's see what the options are. I mean, I'm happy to help, but you guys have done this before on your own, and then you bring it back to us, we discuss it, then we go to the public. But I mean, we've just spent a long time discussing. It seems like
With the closest
we need
consensus,
more
there seemed to
than we
be
have.
a little, the closest consensus might have been on this idea of a blackout region, like a, do you guys feel that that was the
I
one thing
agree.
we came to close consensus on?
Well, that was only one. I mean, I think some people liked registration, and then what are the, other things that we have within our toolbox, but I think there's a couple of different issues.
I think if we decide registration, that there's like manpower and like there's resources that go along with that. It's like, we want to make sure that we're not.
I mean, if it's 15 kids that need to register their bike, it's like, how many dogs are there in the town? I don't know. I just think
I don't know.
it's worth
I don't
putting
either,
it on the
but-
table to see.
Yeah, no,
if
no,
it's-
I guess I'm not
I-
saying you should or shouldn't. I just think we should think about what that suggests. That's all.
Right.
Chief, what would you recommend?
That the parking department does the registration.
How about
The fire department.
What about the
actually
town
does it.
clerk?
who does the dog license?
The town clerk does registration,
Could you just,
but I mean,
could you just tell me again, because this is a big issue. Tell me again precisely, what safety result does registration generate?
I mean, it's the beginning of
Specifically.
education. To me, it's the beginning of education. You
Well,
bring
you
the
don't get
parent and the child together and you have them register the bike, and then maybe there's a pamphlet or something about what's our ordinance, what are the rules? They get to know the SRO, they get to know the youth officer,
Why
and
can't
it
we do
just
that
makes
without
people more
registration?
accountable. What?
Why can't we do that without registration?
You could, I just don't know how to do it. But I mean, most parents aren't going to get in there unless you haul them in there to register, and there could be a fee. It could generate revenue for the town. It could be like, I don't know, dog fees $5. What could the e-bike fee be? $50? I don't know. It's just a thought. But I just think it begins the education process. It makes the parents realize it's a serious thing, makes the kid realize it's a serious thing, and there's an accountability. And
It brings about a conversation and a responsibility level that the parent now has to register the e-bike and to have that talk with their child and not be aware of the ordinances that we create.
right.
It's just another vehicle to.
You were
focus.
talking about safety, but now you're talking about being parent and education. So you're not talking about safety then, you're talking about
No, it's a
having a
we
way
think
parent and a
to,
child
that
have
will
a
help.
conversation.
That will help the safety.
Yeah,
Because the
it's-
parent will then guide the child to ride during and follow the ordinances, know what the consequences are and things like that. Because right now, someone goes and buys a bike and then they just go out on the street. I mean, most people don't know the state law. Their parents aren't educating them on what the ordinances are. And so it just makes sheds light on the whole issue. And it is a safety issue. It's just one avenue, one tool to get at safety. And then there's other things you could do as well.
Maria has her hand raised.
I think,
Maria,
I was just thinking the difference between the registration and generalized education is you're either educating the people you know have a bike, or you're educating the entire, population of students, many of whom don't have a bike. So, I mean, that, you were just asking, what does registration get you? And I think it is a hyper focus on the actual owners and their families and being able to inform them. Otherwise, you don't know, you still don't know who has the bikes. You don't know if you're reaching those people. So it is
Mhm.
sort of a way to enforce an education with the people that actually do have the bikes.
But then we'd have to have ready to go this mechanism that once you register, then immediately some pamphlet, something has to be set, like in order to achieve what you just were talking about, then
Mhm.
there has to be,
materials.
like, we're not the DMV yet, or whatever, but like the things that you'd automatically get that would achieve what you're talking about.
Could just be a
I mean-
copy of the ordinance and the state law. I mean, it's
I also
already,
don't know how we would enforce it. I don't know how we would how would we know if someone had a bike but didn't register?
well, when they get stopped, then they'll make it really simple.
You have the same
Well, no,
issue.
that-
What
that-
happens?
That
You have the
wouldn't be
same issue.
simple. The way it works now is if you stop somebody, you call into a database to figure out whether there's a history, right? In
Right.
an automobile situation.
Yeah.
Here, to have that capability of calling into a database, is a big deal.
It
In
is.
real time, it's a big deal. Anyway, let's think about this and we'll get another meeting scheduled. Is January soon enough? Does anybody want to meet in December?
is that soon enough, or would you like us to push it?
December's
All
gonna be
those bikes
crazy.
being given for Christmas, I think we should meet Christmas Eve. Chief, are you guys?
Good luck, let me know how it goes.
We'll meet and then we'll go to Carolyn.
Just kidding.
Well, Chief was
And then
saying
we'll go
that
Carolyn.
there's some
on a bike.
seasonality to this,
Yep.
so
I think
It's
slow
we have some
season.
time.
Yeah, that's a
Well,
good
we-
point.
At 65 degrees today.
Yeah,
I know.
exactly.
when is this gonna get
Climate
real?
change.
I think January is fine.
I think January's fine.
I think January's fine.
So we'll find a date. Well, thank you very much. It's been very good, very useful.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Tom. Thank
Thanks
you.
for all the
Thank you, Hillary.
preparation that two of you guys.
Okay, I'm going to turn off the meeting now.
You-
Bye.
Thanks all. I'm hitting end.
Thanks,
if I
Chief.
can find it.
Thank you.